welcome to those who are coming back to my space and those who are here for the first time. I am the head of the book arts department at Creative Arts Workshop. And in my private work, I am primarily a box maker and I make artist books. And that's what we'll focus on today. We have with us Beatrice Coron, with whom I'm collaborating. She's just waved. With whom I'm collaborating on one large piece, and I will get to that a little later in our presentation, and Beatrice will join in the conversation. What I thought I would do is present 4 projects and pause at the end of the presentation of each project so that you can ask any questions that you might have pertaining to that project. That way it kind of, the flow doesn't get too interrupted, and with Zoom freezing up as it sometimes does, it'll make things run a little bit more smoothly. So because much of this is focusing on box making, the first thing I want to introduce you to is a clamshell box. Now I'm going to change the orientation of my screen so that you're no longer going to have to see my face, but you can just see my hands and the objects that I'm presenting. Is that in a good place, Robin? Okay, so this is a clamshell box. It's a small one. You can see it fits in my hands. It's a box that fits on a shelf, and when it's on a shelf, it looks like a book. It opens like a book, and it is made from 2 halves called the clams, right? A small half and a large half, and the object fits in the smaller half. And I just wanted to show this to you so that you get an idea, get the orientation for what we're about to talk about. Many of you know about this and have made clamshell boxes. Some of you have no idea about this, so I'm starting at 0 here. And inside this particular clamshell box is a miniature book that I made that holds some delicate little drawings of bird feet. So this is a clamshell box. I'll pause at the end of the next one to talk about it. So the first project that I want to talk about is a clamshell box that I was asked to make for these 2 books. These are daily reminder books from the 1950s that belonged to my father-in-law, actually. And they are 2 different sizes. I have here the clamshell box in parts. So the clamshell box, as I said, is made of 2 halves. Here are the 2 halves, the smaller half and the larger half. When you make a clamshell box for 2 objects that are 2 different sizes, the smaller half has to accommodate first the largest size. So there it is, accommodating the larger book, right? But I don't want to just put this smaller book in here and have it wiggle all around, because that would not be safe for the preservation of the book. So I've made an insert. This insert is made from foam core, so it's very light, covered with the same material that the box is made of. And this insert will get glued in here. I've not glued it in yet, so I could show it to you. So that insert fits the smaller book perfectly. And then the larger book rests on top, and the weight of the larger book is on the insert. It's not on the lower book. Here's the larger half of the clam that fits on top. These things then get glued to what we call in bookbinding the case, which is 3 boards, the spine, a front cover, and a back cover, basically the same 3 parts that a book has. And the smaller clam gets glued to the left-hand side, and the larger clam will get glued to the right-hand side, and then the whole thing will close up. This particular box then will be finished with a reproduction of a photograph with my father-in-law wielding an axe in the woods. So that's the first two projects that I wanted to present to you, the first two little clamshells here. Does anyone have any questions about these before I move on to something larger and more complicated? You can type them into the chat and then Robin will relay the question to me, or you can unmute yourself and speak right up.
Paulette?
Hi, Patty.
How are you?
Good, how are you? Here.
Good. I have a question.
Yes.
Is there a size limit for those type of books in the clamshell box that you would suggest? I mean, I don't know how heavy or how large you would be able to put a book. Two different size books, I guess, is the question. You know, how big, you know, is there, you think there's a, you know, a size limit to that?
I'm sure there is a size limit. But what happens as you get larger, you have to change the materials that you're making the box out of and that you're making the supports out of. So I have made a clamshell box that is about closed 25 inches by 30 inches. That's really big, right? And in order to keep the boards from warping, this is maybe a little more technical for some people than for others. You need to double up the thickness of the boards, or use really thick boards. So you have to use a balance between the materials that are going to be sturdy enough for that and those that won't be too unbearably heavy to lift. Some people make clamshell boxes when they get larger out of very thin wood and then cover them with silk cloth. So that becomes another option.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Paulette, I'm seeing a question in the chat that's asking, how will you attach the photograph to the front of the box?
I have two choices. There are two methods that I would use to attach it. One would be to use the standard bookbinding glue, which is a PVA, polyvinyl acetate. It's a white glue that is very tacky, and I would use little dots of it on the back of the photograph and then just really carefully put it in place. There's a recess. I don't know if it shows up in the video image, but there's a recess in the top of this box so that the photograph will sit below the surface of the box area. Alternatively, I often use a double-sided archival tape made by 3M. It's 3M number 415, and it comes in different widths, 1/8 inch, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, 1 inch, and maybe 2 inches. And you know, it's a dry adhesive. It's a double-sided tape that has its limitations in terms of how long it's going to last. That is, a dry adhesive doesn't last as long as a wet adhesive does. But in terms of archival quality and adhesion, it's really, really good. So that I would use one or the other of those things.
Great. There's also a self-described book nerd tech question.
Yeah. If I can do that.
What sort of foam board did you use for the insert?
If you let me step away, I'll show you a raw piece of it very quickly.
The benefit of doing this from your own studio. It's wonderful.
Yes. So I'm just talking about foam core board, right? Just that kind of standard foam core board that you can find in art supply stores that has foam in the middle and it's paper on either side. These days you can actually find acid-free foam core board in art supply stores when we can get back to them. Anything else? Yep. Okay. All right. Good. So this next project is something that an idea that I had been working on in my head for a couple of years, and finally was able to have the time to do it. I finished it in February, just before we were all locked in here. This is a large clamshell box, a little piece of fuzz on it, and it's called Phone Book. So I'll just show it all to you before I go any further. So this is it's got black textured canopetta cloth on the outside, and the edges are a silver chromo book cloth. It measures about 12.5 inches square and about 2 inches deep. Here's the small half of the clam. Here's the large half of the clam. The small half in this case is 4 sides. In the other 2 clamshell boxes I showed you, the small half was 3-sided so that you could take things out more easily. So this box holds a book and 2 objects. The book comes out by pulling a ribbon so that it can lift out of its nest. And this book is the size and shape of a smartphone. Hello? The idea started as I was in my travels, seeing people all over the world. Every place I was traveling, people were taking selfies. And I said, well, so I started taking photographs of people taking selfies. So these are photographs of people taking selfies all over the world. At least the parts of the world in this country that I traveled in the last couple of years. I'm not a photographer. These are not fabulous photographs. It's about the concept. It's about the concept of looking at oneself. It begins and ends in Coney Island. And in between, there's Italy and Morocco and out west in the United States, New York City. The back of the accordion book has the names of all the places and I printed it out and printed on cardstock and then attached it. And back to my box. So this box holds 2 selfie sticks. Oh. 2. I'll talk about the box in a second, but I have to do the whole thing here. And each of these selfie sticks attaches to the book. So there are 2 ways you can read this book. You can hold the selfie sticks in your hand and you can open up the book like this and close the book like this. A little hard to get the right angle here. Tilt this up a little bit. And each selfie stick is also a tripod. I had to do some shopping to get exactly the right kind of selfie stick. And the book can stand for display on this tripod of selfie sticks. They can also telescope out so that the sticks can be, a couple of feet long, like a selfie stick can be. So they can be displayed at a higher level, a taller level, that is. So that's my phone book.
So cool.
Let me talk about the box. And you can see why it took me such a long time to do it. It took me a couple of years to kind of develop the idea and figure out how that was going to work. So for those who are box makers out there, we'll get a little nerdy about box making and about the sequence of how they get made. And I had to write it down so that I wouldn't forget. So the first thing that I did was to make 3 boxes for the 3 objects. Yes, I see Miriam Scher is asking, I'm assuming this is a unique book. Thanks for the question, Miriam. At this point, it's unique. That is, there's only one that's been made. It has the potential to be an edition. You know, though I can reproduce those photographs, I can reproduce the book. There's nothing unique about the content of this book that could not be reproduced. I haven't, and if I was to make more than one, we would call that an edition. I have not yet decided whether I'm going to edition this or not, or whether I'll just keep it as a unique book. Time, the amount of time it takes may be the determinant for that. So to get back to how this gets made, 3 boxes for the 3 objects, right? The book and the 2 selfie sticks. They're just 3 4-sided with a bottom, 5-sided boxes with an open top. That's the first thing I made, and they were rectangles. These were rectangles too. These were not part of the original box. They were made just full rectangles for each one, and each of those boxes was covered with material on the inside. So that's the part you're seeing of these 3 little boxes covered on the inside. Then there are different depths because the selfie sticks are deeper when they're closed than the book was. So when you make a box, you need to have the objects ready, finished, before you make that box. The box is going to fit these objects exactly. So the book was finished before, and I had the selfie sticks in hand before I even began the box. And so I had to raise up the box so that the top part of this little box would match the depth of these. So these are deeper than this box is. So there's a little lift underneath this one. So now this surface was all the same. Then I made a large 4-sided box, covered the outside of it with this silver cloth and turned it inside the edge a little bit, and positioned these 3 boxes and glued them in place. Right, and then I made the, what I call, for lack of a better word, the furniture, that is these little extra square rectangles here, 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 and here, so that the selfie sticks would kind of be secured in the box when it was closed. And finally, I took a piece of board and covered it and covered the surface of everything so that the surfaces were all uniform. That was making the small half of the clamshell box. Then I made the large half to fit over it and close it. And then finally made the case of the clamshell box, which is the spine and the front cover and the back cover. So the 2 things I have not yet decided about this, as I mentioned, I haven't decided whether I'm going to make an edition of it or not. And the other thing I haven't decided is whether it needs an instruction book. So if someone else was to own this, or if it was to be displayed, would it be useful to have a little booklet or perhaps just a photograph of the book as it's displayed in the selfie sticks attached here in some fashion or hidden underneath the book? So I'm thinking that through. I'm happy to entertain people's suggestions about that. So that's my phone book. And I'll open it up to questions or comments about that.
I see one question, Paulette, that came up while you were speaking, asking approximately how much time does it take to complete a project like phone book? Oh, that's come up a few times actually now. How long did it take you?
Oh, boy.
I know.
Well, let's see. If you include the thinking part, 3 years.
Come on.
And that's part of the project. That's part of making the art part of the project, as opposed to the craft part of it. You get an idea for something, you say, gosh, I'm starting to see people take selfies. You see that for a while before you get an idea that you want to start taking photographs of people taking selfies. And then you've got to take the photographs. And then you say, okay, I think I want to take them in lots of different parts of my travels. And then I've got to get good photographs. You can see how it ends up taking a lot of time. But in terms of the actual making of it, I would say this was probably about 2 months of work, several hours a day, between the printing of the photographs and the trimming of it. And, the first time you make something, if it's editioned, the next ones will go faster. But you're figuring it all out as you go along. I had not thought about what the back of this book was going to look like before I started making it, that I would put something here that would look like a camera eye. Mm-hmm. Those are the sorts of things that evolve as you're working on something. Anything else?
So Paulette, it looks like a camera on the screen, which is really amazing.
Hi,
your
Jen.
book.
Thank
Hi.
you. Hi.
What I was thinking is when you were first saying that you made the book and then that the book to look like a cell phone, I was thinking that you were going to say that you were then using your book cell phone to pretend that you were then taking the selfies, but that it was of yourself, but it was really a book. So I just wanted to put that out there. That might be sort of a fun thing to also make, so that you could, pretend and be part of the group.
Absolutely. There's a lot of meta levels that you can go to with this project. That's a great one. Another one is setting it up and then taking a selfie. Me taking a selfie with this project next to me. So that becomes another commentary on a commentary on a commentary. Yeah, it's really, it's endless. These self-reflections are endless. Anything else? Anybody?
That's it for me.
Okay.
I actually do have, hi Paulette.
Oh,
It's Catherine.
Catherine, hi.
Hello. I do have a question I thought about when you were showing the earlier book, which is the recessed area where you put the photograph on the cover. Mm-hmm. How did you do that? And also, maybe I missed it, but what material is the box made out of?
Okay, you didn't miss that. I missed saying something about that. So let me just step off camera and get a piece of something to show you. So this is binder's board. This is what book covers and boxes are made out of in the book binding world. It's a kind of a cardboard, for lack of a better word. It comes in different thicknesses. And the way it is made, it's actually made in layers, so that if I take a blade and cut a rectangle, I can actually peel out a layer of that board. I can peel out several layers to get it recessed enough. What I have to be aware of is what's going to go back into that recess before the photograph. So some cloth might go in there, or some paper. You kind of have to account for all the layers that you're going to put in there so that you know how much to take away, right? So it's called binder's board. Excuse me, it's called Davey, D-A-V-E-Y is the brand. It is readily available in bookbinding supply places. Here on the East Coast, we buy it from Talas, Talas online.com. a wonderful place to shop for all bookbinding supplies, and they are still shipping from New York City.
Thank you.
So that's what we're using. And then the cloth that's covering everything is called book cloth, which is cloth that is, again, prepared specifically for bookbinders and box makers. It is backed with paper or heavily starched so that when you put glue on it, the glue doesn't squish through to the good side. You can make your own book cloth, you can back your own kind of fabric, but you need to stabilize fabric and stabilize the warp and the weft by backing it, and also backing it to prevent the glue from coming through to the good side. Anything else?
Paulette, Patty
Yes.
again. When in your selfie stick book,
Yes.
the covering that you used obviously was book cloth, but was it one piece on the side that had all the cutouts when you covered over?
So this part here?
Yes, yes.
So yeah, this, it's one piece of board.
Okay,
This is one continuous piece of board
okay,
that I covered with book cloth
okay,
first.
okay.
But I also left flaps attached to that so that that it's continuously covered here and here
Okay.
and here and
Mhm. Mhm. Okay.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, we can always come back to that if questions arise. This is perfect timing. This is where I hoped we'd be at 1:30, because now I'm going to present this project that Beatrice Coron and I collaborated on. So Beatrice and I met at a show, the Book Arts show, Artist Books Show Freed Formats, that was displayed in many places in Connecticut and a creative arts workshop. And we admired each other's work and said, hey, we should collaborate on something. Beatrice can make the book, make the pages, and I can make the box. That's as far as we got when we first started talking about it. We began with some Skype meetings to generate some ideas, and settled on just a general theme of birds. For those people who know me, you can imagine I had a little bit of influence in that. A lot of my artwork involves birds. But I'd like to invite Beatrice into this conversation so that she can talk about how she took that concept of birds and turned it into what she turned it into. And while she speaks, I will turn away from the camera. She'll be on camera, and I'll get the book that was created by the two of us.
Okay. Yes. So that was interesting to work on birds, because I have birds stopping on my balcony, and I have a lot of books about birds, and I'm interested in bird watching. In fact, right now I'm giving peanuts to the blue jays so they come more often on my balcony. And I was looking for a theme that was preoccupying at the moment, and it was about the habitat for the birds. So I wanted to work on the endangered birds. So that was my first idea, was about the endangered birds. So I began to research different birds in different habitats around the world. And then I narrowed down for 6 different birds. And I wanted the birds also to be a little different in their colors, in little everything. So then I got my 6 birds. And of course, with birds, people who know my work, I'm mostly black and white, but birds have colors. So that was a challenge to render the colors, and that's what also I was interested in. And then after with the colors, I was looking about what makes sense about the habitat, the endangered habitat, what is threatening the birds. And of course, a lot of threatening the bird, it's our way of consumption. And one of it, it's using plastic bags. So then I was like, okay, I can use the plastic bags to make the color. And then I further my thoughts about, yeah, it makes sense, because when I began to make the proof, it was like, oh, it's so pretty. And I was like, yeah, that's the problem, because we always like the things that are bad for us. So we want to use plastic bags that have pretty colors. And in fact, that's what is endangering the birds and their habitat. So that's how it started.
So Beatrice cut the pages. And how did you decide on the shape of the pages?
The shape of the pages, that's from our conversation, because what we are skipping, it's like a lot of back and forth on what, you know, I thought about the bird, and I send you a list of birds, and you send me back a list of birds. So we had a lot of in between that we are not completely telling. And then after, for the birds, we thought about making the box as a birdhouse.
Right.
And then after I wanted, and I didn't want to have too much of a square page, because the birds have to be free. So then I began to think about what they have to be free on the top. So the top needs to be the foliage. And then we started like that, to have the page that are free on the top. And maybe I should turn my computer to show you the birds on my window, because I have birds and I have trees on the back.
Fabulous. Those birds are a lot freer than the ones that are in our book. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So with all this talking, let me show you what we came up with. Here, so I'm trying to, now I'm not in the big screen here. So here are the pages. Beatrice sent me individual pages. And there are 6 of them. And each one has a different bird on them, and uses different plastic bags to provide the color. And they're hinged together as an accordion book, which is why it's movable the way it is. Is this visible? Is this visible on the screen?
Yes.
Yes. Good. And the accordion spine is made of black Tyvek, double-sided Tyvek. And then I doubled it up into 2 layers to give it a thickness and a sturdiness. So when Beatrice talks about the freedom of the birds, so, you know, we're not dealing with a page size here. So now we get this book, and we say, okay, we have the book, now we want to put it in a box. Well, that gets complicated, because we have this beautiful, delicate, free book that can be folded out for gorgeous display, but now needs to be stored carefully in a box. And then at some point, I said to Beatrice in our ongoing conversations, should we have some text in this? And she said, oh, I have a friend who's a poet. And so she worked with him to create a poem. So now we have a poem, and we have a book that all needs to be somehow put into a box. It went through several permutations, but I'll show you where we stand at this point before I go backwards to show you where we started. Because I'm excited, actually, Beatrice hasn't seen where we stand at this point. So the first thing I needed to do in order to put this beautiful book in a box. It needs to be safely secured in a folder. So here is the folder for the book. It will stand like this in the box. It opens and it has flaps with a graphic invitation of where exactly to lay the book down when it needs to go into its box, and flaps that close that have soft foam on the inside of each flap to help gently hold this book in place. So the book securely stands like that, and then it closes up like this. So in this regard, it can stand on a bookshelf without doing any damage to the book itself. The bottoms of the bottom edges of each page, as we talked about, Beatrice, have a flat edge that help give it support.
Yeah, the first version, we didn't have any flat edge.
That's right. So
Yeah.
the first version, I can show the first version. Oh, let me show the final version first. Final version first, and then the first version final. And then we decided, well, where's the poem going to go? And I decided we wanted to basically create something that was going to be an entire display when it was finished. So I've created 2 folders. And by the way, this is an addition. We are making 6 of these. So we have 6 books that are already finished, and we have 6 of each of these folders that I have completed. So we have one folder that for the book, it will stand like this, and then this folder that is now empty, but will hold the poem, which will be here, and a beautiful paper cut that Beatrice did that will be attached on this side with the silver chromo cloth shining through it. So now you're kind of creating this display opportunity. So this can stand up. You have your folder. The book can come out of the folder can close, and the silver of the folder can be like a pedestal for the book. And finally, there will be a box made to hold both folders, and that box will be a slipcase. I'm just going to set the book aside so that I get nervous handling it too much.
I will recut another one for you.
All right, just whip out another one. So these 2 folders will slide into a slipcase, and the front of that slipcase will have an image of a birdhouse on it. So let me show you where this started. First of all, it started with a whole different color scheme. Here's the slipcase that we started with. So here's this is a slipcase. It has the two folders in it. It has raised areas of board covered with bark paper of different colors to indicate a birdhouse. And in my initial incarnation, I thought we would have 2 slots separate for each folder. So this was the folder for the book, and this was the folder for the poem. We were talking about blue at first. I thought we would have 2 slots in the slipcase. Now the slipcase is just going to have 1 slot. There doesn't seem to be a reason to have 2. And we did away with the blue. The final color will be this kind of woven blackish gray. And this was the first version of the folder. This is the prototype that Beatrice sent me so that I could kind of play around with things and figure out how to bind it. So this this had a recess here for the book to sit in, and hard raised board here to hold it in place. And what I discovered actually after making it and playing around with it is that that created a groove in the book, and did not hold it in a gentle enough way. So I had to kind of rethink entirely how I was going to construct that folder. And it, you know, it's a wonderful design challenge. It's really, really great fun to try and figure these kinds of things out. So that was the evolution of the whole thing. Beatrice, anything more to chime in here?
And no, it was a great adventure.
It is still.
Yeah, it is still. And I know with the blue, I was like, oh no, this too hard blue, we should paint. And after it gets so complicated that
Right.
back to another solution.
Right, we started, well, maybe we should paint the blue cloth, and it did. It kind of, you need to kind of pull back to find the simplest, most elegant solutions where the form reflects the function of it in true Bauhaus tradition, and where the form reflects the content of it as well. So I'm excited to move on to making the slipcases, which is.
I'm very excited to see the first
work.
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So either Beatrice or I will both entertain any questions or comments anybody has. I can also say that this is the folder of ideas. This is what happens, and when you start, I don't know if you work this way, Beatrice, but I write everything down on slips of paper. Here are the prototypes of the flaps that didn't work so well. Here are my little drawings of how that would work. Here are the templates, because this is going to be an edition, so once I settled on something, I need templates for the sizes of everything that I'm going to cut, so that I don't have to measure carefully each thing.
And me, I'm not that organized because I don't make boxes, but that's my folder. It's a whole bag because I have all the plastic bag for the different colors. And then I made the different template for each color and each bird. So I'm not making boxes, so it's all in a shopping bag.
Exactly.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
I don't want to be crass, but these things are absolutely magnificent. How do you know how to price it? You're going to make an edition of it. How will you price it?
That's a question that Beatrice and I are having a conversation about right now.
Yeah, that's the main question every time you finish a book, the pricing. Yeah, because we were speaking about how much time you put on it, and when you begin to think about the time, it's like, forget it, you don't sell it at all, you don't show it.
Right. Well, I will tell you, kudos to both of you. It is breathtaking on both sides, the book and the contents of it. Just magnificent.
Thank
you.
Janet. Thank you, Janet.
I'm seeing some questions come up in the chat about one to Beatrice. Where are you located? Some people, you've referenced the fact that you've had Skype meetings and have mailed the pages to each other. So, and then I think maybe this follow-up question maybe answers the first one. Miriam Scherer is asking if you had problems finding bags once the plastic bag ban went into effect in New York City.
So I live in New York City. My studio is in Manhattan. And then after, for the plastic bag, I really like the idea of introducing color. And of course, with the bird, when you have some light on it, it's really nice how it plays with the light to have the plastic bag. So it looks a little like stained glass windows. So I like this idea for a long time. So I've been keeping plastic bag for a very long time. So I have a stock of, because of course I don't want the beige or the white. So I was always looking for the difficult colors to get in plastic bag, like the pink and the green and the turquoise. So I always had a big stash of plastic bag that I collected from different countries and different places. So I still have many projects I can do with plastic bags after the ban, because I have them, and they won't go in landfill anyway. They're here.
Good reuse. Another question that's come up for Paulette, will the new slipcase have a similar birdhouse on the front, or will you be doing that differently for the new version?
Yes, the plan is to have a similar birdhouse image on the front of the slipcase.
Wonderful. A little bit of a technical question. Is Paulette using a phone or a laptop for her camera?
That's my laptop right now.
Zoom tutorial.
I'm using my laptop and just setting it, quietly on the table in front of me. I find that it's better to not move the actual laptop around, but just to tilt the top of the laptop so the angle of the camera changes.
One question for Beatrice. Did you cut each page for each edition individually?
Yes, because for having more stability, I used the Arches cover. And with Arches cover, I cut each page individually. And then after, I had to cut an extra bird so I can put the plastic and have an extra bird on it. So it looks the same on both sides. I mean, one side has an extra level of bird on it.
Yeah, I can show that here. Just tilt this. So here's the bird here. And on the verso, if the camera can catch it, there's an extra bird here to give it an extra, so that the bird looks the same on both sides. Beatrice, what do you use to cut? What's your preferred cutting tool?
My little X-Acto Blade 11. In fact, I have a lot of X-Acto around here, but they're all Blade 11. And all my surfaces it's all cutting board everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I cut, most of the time, I cut Arches cover or Tyvek.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's Tyvek, I can cut through an edition all at the same time.
Ah.
Yeah. I just finished an edition of 100 zebras, and I did cut my 100 zebras in one time. So I didn't cut 300 zebras. It's an edition of 3.
I'm seeing a technical bookbinding question about wheat paste. I think this is directed to you, Paulette. Do you make your own wheat paste? And if so, what is the formula?
When I do use wheat paste, I do mix my own. I don't use wheat paste very often. It takes a long time to dry, and it's used, I mean, some bookbinders and book artists obviously do use it. It's used more often in repairs and conservation of books and boxes. So I use an instant cold water wheat paste, and you kind of, depending on the use of it, you add enough wheat paste to get the consistency that you're looking for. So there really isn't a good formula for it. What you're looking for is how thick do you need it for the purpose that you're using it for. So you might make it as thick as mayonnaise if you're going to clean the spine of a book, but you might make it as thin as kind of a watery yogurt, staying with dairy-ish products, as a watery yogurt if you're going to be using it to kind of glue a whole piece of paper down. But again, that tends not to be what I use for adhesive. I use a mixture of PVA, polyvinyl acetate, and I cut that to slow down the drying time and to make it spread more easily, I cut that with a methylcellulose mixture. So I mix up the methylcellulose powder into cold water, let that thicken, and then add some of that into the PVA to get the quality of adhesive that I'm looking for. Anything else? Other questions?
I have another question.
Go ahead,
Can
Janet.
you hear me?
Yes.
For those people who weren't lucky enough to have watched this, is there a way to reproduce this that I could send it to other people, that they could enjoy this tour?
Yes, thanks for asking, Janet. We have been, I mentioned at the beginning that this is being recorded, so it is taking us a few days. We're small staff and still learning a lot, but we have been posting them on our website at creativeartsworkshop.org. So I would say give us a few days, maybe early next week. It should be available, and then you can share it through that site.
Oh, that's just great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
I'll also just take this moment to announce for people who haven't already seen it posted on our website that Beatrice is graciously accepted the invitation to do a studio tour with us in 2 weeks' time, I believe. So I see some questions popping up in the chat asking, can Beatrice talk about her work? It's a very intriguing view we have of your studio. So I don't know that there's time for that today, more than a moment or two, but yeah, please do come back in 2 weeks. I think that registration is already up on our website.
Fantastic. That's great.
Yeah. A lot of new things to get adapted to.
We're all learning. We can all still learn.
I know.
Well, thank you all. If there are more questions, we're happy to stay and answer them. But if there are no other questions and comments, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in. It's a pleasure to see many familiar faces and names. I hope everyone stays well.